Good morning. When I moved to Asheville, I knew nothing about homelessness other than what I'd seen on TV. And then the recession happened, and suddenly I was homeless. And I hadn't been in the shelter for more than a week before I was warned to watch out for the bumblebees, the downtown bike cops in their black and yellow uniforms. I dismissed the warning. Don't want trouble with the police? Don't break the law. Seems simple to me. It doesn't matter, I was told. You're homeless now. They'll find something to charge you with whether you do anything or not. I still shrugged it off. I figured I wasn't a drunk or a druggie or any other type of loser, so it didn't apply to me. But sure enough, within a month, I had the police glaring at me because I dared to sit in a public park in winter. I was lucky. I still wore my office clothes. I didn't look homeless, so they never did anything more than glare. But I quickly learned that I wasn't as different as I'd thought. Most of the homeless people around me weren't drunks or druggies, most weren't losers, and most weren't criminals. But most did feel that they'd been harassed by the police. I heard the same stories over and over again. People having their backpacks searched for no reason, their tents being destroyed, being forced into months of stress and red tape, dealing with court dates and fines they couldn't afford, all for so-called crimes that they either hadn't committed or that we watched tourists get away with every day. And with each citation, each court date, it became all the harder for people to get and keep a job, to get and keep housing, because as soon as you're labeled a criminal, our society assumes the worst. People knew they were being treated unfairly, and they were hurt and they were angry, and I figured I had to channel that energy somewhere useful. So I arranged for our group to present at the service providers meeting, which included the city's homeless office and the police department. We had a simple ask: release some of the data surrounding homeless citations and arrests. In particular, we wanted to know the percentage of the charges that actually resulted in a conviction. We knew from experience that a lot of these charges ended up being thrown out, which means it was a waste of everyone's time and energy for them to be made in the first place. We figured this would be easy to demonstrate once we had the data, and that no one in the city wanted to waste resources on frivolous charges. We were wrong. We presented and were promptly ignored. The city didn't track that data, and they weren't interested in trying. Neither the police department, the homeless office, or anyone else cared. Why should they? We were homeless, therefore we were losers, and nothing we had to say mattered. Code for Asheville didn't exist yet. Fast forward a few years. Our old group dissolved, Beloved's Homeless Voice Project took its place, and one day a bunch of folks in Navy track jackets showed up and asked, how can we help? Beloved began working with Code for Asheville to sort through the available data on charges like trespassing that were most often used against our people. They used public crime data and filtered that down using the addresses that people gave when they were charged. The city may not have officially tracked homeless arrests, but we knew that if someone was giving their address as a homeless shelter, chances are they were homeless. So, and sure enough, the data showed that people with those addresses were more likely to be charged with trespassing than people with other addresses. In fall 2016, Code for Asheville and Beloved presented the data to our city's Homeless Advisory Committee and at a public rally. This time, the press picked it up, and the Public Safety Committee asked us to present there too. That was the start of a campaign led by Amy Cantrell from Beloved and Patrick Conant from Code for Asheville, which has kept the issue in City Council eye ever since.
So when the campaign hit the news, the city's homeless lead came to me to say that there was a problem with Patrick's analysis of the data, that one of the addresses he had used, the jail, was used as a kind of default address by law enforcement, and so it wasn't a good indicator of whether somebody was homeless. But she was really interested in the results, and I encouraged her to reach out to Patrick and work with him to improve the analysis. That was a moment of choice for our city. The choice about what story we would tell about this odd mix of homeless advocates and techies, and how that story might lead us to respond. For example, we could have framed it this way, that some folks in our community were inviting us and themselves to be held accountable to the data, and that we had an opportunity to collaborate with them on a tough issue in our community. We could have, but we didn't. The homeless lead was pulled back, and we wasted months on disputing the analysis, questioning motives, waiting for the activists to go away. It worked not well. The issue pretty quickly escalated first to city management and on up through the Public Safety Committee and on to City Council, and of course it all played out in social media and in the press. We tried to make it go away, and the result was that it got louder and stronger. Now, the data originally came through a public records request rather than our open data portal, so IT wasn't involved at first. But pretty soon the city manager asked us to step in and facilitate a more constructive conversation. That culminated in a meeting that involved the homeless advocates, Code for Asheville, the Asheville Police Department, the city's homeless initiative team, and a couple of us from the open data team. The concrete outcome of that meeting was a decision to build a homelessness dashboard, but the real benefit of the meeting was that all the participants had a chance to hear about some of the challenges of the others, and we laid the groundwork for a more constructive conversation going forward. That wasn't the end of the saga, of course. A few months later, Patrick worked with the NAACP to raise the issue of racial disparities in traffic stops. And more recently, Code for Asheville has requested open policing data in the aftermath of a horrific police brutality incident last summer. And in each case, old instincts kicked in and led us down a less than helpful path. And it was only when we began to reach out and engage with the activists and the affected communities that we began to find common ground and be able to move forward. You may have noticed that this is not exactly a success story. It's an interim report from the field about a long, difficult process of trying to figure out how to use data and conversation to address really difficult issues in our communities. We don't have a nice conclusion. We don't know how it all comes out, but there are a few lessons we've kind of picked up along the way that we thought would be worth sharing here today.
First, trust affected communities to understand their own problems. Sure, sometimes an outsider's perspective or a view from the other side of a system can help. But you're never going to understand a problem as well as you think you do if you're not listening to the people who are actually living that problem day to day. They know which of your systems are working and which ones aren't, and chances are they know why they're not working. And they've probably spent a whole lot more time than you have thinking about what kind of solutions might work. After all, your job might depend on it, but their lives depend on it. Next, use your privilege to support those without it. I don't want to downplay the real work that both Beloved and Code for Asheville put into this, but part of the reason this campaign got attention when our previous attempts didn't is that this time around we had professional, white men helping make our case. The world shouldn't be that way, but for now it still is. We're going to change that, but in the meantime, learn to recognize what resources your privilege gives you that others might not share. That might be time, it might be money, it might be skills, or it might simply be social and professional capital. Whatever form it takes, if you've got it, talk to those who don't and find out how it can be used to help them.
So I see a couple of lessons, particularly for those of us in government who are trying to do open data well. And the first builds on what Sabrah said about trust. One of the most profound shifts of perspective that you can make is to learn to see the activists in our community, the ones who are giving voice to the anger of their communities and trying to advocate for them, as partners, not problems. Embrace them and bring them into the process. I guarantee it will take the heat down, and you might find yourself surprised at how much value they bring. And finally this, change is coming. Change is coming, and we have a choice. We can facilitate that change and maintain our places at the table. We can make life easier for ourselves and better for our communities. Or we can waste our resources fighting the change. The one thing we cannot do is stop it. It's your pick. Thanks for listening.